I think it's bloop. I think it started. You
I
can
think it should
tell.
go bleep, bleep,
You, yeah, 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 totally. You can tell from the bloops and the bleeps that we're on, man. So here's the thing. I went to some weddings. I traveled. We traveled. My family. We traveled and went to some weddings and met some people at the weddings. That tends to happen or sometimes happens. But met a creative person or two, and I mentioned in the course of yammering about creativity and creative projects this the support that we have been getting from Anna Fogues, who unceremoniously dumped us recently, but hopefully will
It was a
maybe.
little bit of ceremony. It was
Yeah, there was some.
appropriately
It
ceremonious.
was appropriately ceremonious, and maybe will be, maybe there'll be more of that sort of support. Anyway, it didn't take anyone long to sort of be like, "Can I sign up for that?" And it
Hmm.
just strikes me. There are such things as creative coaches, but I don't think it's exactly coaching. I mean, it is partly coaching, but it's this sort of mix of accountability, organization, project management, and some wisdom thrown in there. And I wonder if that's a formation that is out there widely in the world, because it just feels like once you experience it, you're like, I'll take it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I got a follow up email yesterday from one of the guys being like,
Go,
you,
where do I
yeah,
sign up?
yeah, exactly. And to me, it's part of the formula. I think like if we're systems thinking
Yeah.
our way towards how to manifest creativity in your life, especially alongside a life that's where it's not the focus, the central focus of every day.
Such a good idea.
Yeah, that's part of the system. I feel like we've lived it.
Yeah, and what also the next page that turns to in my brain is groups. You need you need bounces. And I know that there are writers groups and there are all these kinds of things, but at least for the stuff that I'm doing, I feel like I haven't found the sort of like the like I think that the Anna Folks piece is huge, but if you're going to
Right.
systems think, I mean, like if you were to be picked up, or if you, let's say you were starting a creative agency
Yeah.
and you saw somebody who had a lot of talent and you wanted to develop them, you would give them certain things, and part of what you would give them is these sorts of things. You'd give them, well, you probably give them at least somebody, if not yourself, to like have creative, like, what are we doing, what's going
Yeah.
on, how are we working on, what are we doing next, that kind of thing. But you'd also sort of like have some sort of community, you'd build some sort of community around the creation and production and
Yeah.
distribution and all those
Feedbackers.
things,
Well,
all
I
the
see. You were talking
feedbackers.
about
No, I
you're.
think feedback is probably the most important
Well,
thing.
I feel like there's a couple parts. There's a sort of project management piece we were talking about. There's, yeah, your feedback, your bounces. So you're like, what do you think of this idea? These people who are creatively building and helping shape an idea.
Yeah.
But I think there's also another category which is distinct from that, which is encouragers. And actually, we talk about
Mhm.
this among these people that I met at these weddings, which is, yeah, like knowing or figuring out over time who gives you encouragement and increases your fire, and who sort of pulls you down. And I think it was because I actually met people that we knew similar people, and we knew a similar someone in common who I had found really draining. I showed like my project and just had sort of torn it apart and found little ways to introduce doubt into my mind. And so because we knew this mutual person, it sort of led to that discussion. But cultivating your people who end up giving you energy at the end of a conversation where you bounce something off of them, as opposed to people who end up draining energy. And it's not a bad person, good person type of thing. Like there's certain friends of mine
Yeah,
who
yeah,
just
it is
always,
it's bad people.
but there's a particular friend of mine, and really smart and very creative person, who just always drains me at the end of the conversation. I've always lost confidence at the end of the conversation. So it's just sort of whatever it is, for whatever mix of reasons, it's identifying who are those people that build for you and who are those people that don't build, and just cultivating your portfolio of builders is so. I think that's a key part of that
Yeah, and
system.
it's hard. It's hard, and I think it's hard because I think our culture really supports more of the attitude um of, you got to get real, like,
Yeah, yeah,
the competitive landscape out there, you got to be, yeah. So I mean, I don't think your idea is
right.
really gonna. I never forget. I had a friend who was basically working as sort of a script he like reviewing scripts and this is when we were younger, and he sort of like he was passing on he'd be reading a bunch of scripts, and he would sort of pass
Oh,
the
right.
good
Yeah.
ones up, and
That
sort
used
of
to.
but have to explain that to why he thought that those were good.
That's
And I
always
had all these.
that's always
Go ahead.
just to interrupt you for a second. I did have friends that did that too. It's such a strange thing because it's an entry level job. So you have these
Right.
people just entry level, just casting thumbs up or thumbs down on people's like life work and passion with questionable basis, questionable skill background with which to do that. But it is sort
Yeah.
of a strange thing. I guess someone's got to funnel it down. But it
Right.
sort of shows the attitude of the studio overall to like how much they care, right? It's like let some
Well, they don't need, I mean, how many great ideas do you need? And there's always this idea that like, well, what if Citizen Kane ends up on the floor?
right.
Which probably how many Citizen Kanes do end up on the floor. Citizen
Yeah.
Kane, it, after all that effort, is still boring to a lot of people.
Yeah. It's true.
but it got, I mean, any great movie without the kind of, whatever it
Yeah.
got could have been just as lame as the lamest movie,
Yeah.
I think.
They're
But
like, it doesn't matter. We'll get some
but
good stuff in this funnel and we'll make it.
right, and I think that's I mean, that is the reality of big business creativity,
Yeah.
is that there are a few winners that are going to hit the mass audience. And
Yeah.
I think that's the game that most people are playing in their brains when they're being sort of like when they're having the sort of the get real with like
Yeah.
but
But
because
you had this friend who was working
so I
as a
had this friend,
script
this is what, so, and I
screener.
had all these ideas. It was just like popping with ideas for movies, and I was thinking, oh, this would be this is a perfect person to talk to because they know how to. I guess my idea was that they know how to. It's like, I guess the idea is that there's this, that you have an idea that that whatever, it's just a blob, but it's something, and then it's just like, how do you work with this blob to make it to make it better and better,
Right.
and but instead the idea was just like, no, it's not going to work. It's been done before. It was just like it was just like, not in my house. Slap it down, slap it down, slap it down, and just like, where's the skill in that? Because
Yeah.
it seems to me, and I don't think that there's anything that I don't. I mean, he was sort of telling me scripts, and how he took all this pride in reading these scripts that seemed really good, but he knew wasn't
Mm.
going to work.
Mm.
Like that was the talent, was identifying the fatal flaws.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, yeah, they probably anything could be, and you could find a very eloquent way to say why this will never work.
Yeah.
But is that the talent that you want? What good is that talent? The talent that I would be interested in doing would be taking an idea that is flawed as hell and say, oh my God, wait, there's something in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Like this piece could it's just like, and being able to separate wheat from chaff with experience to know that, like, okay, it does need an ABC, we got to build it this way, but there's something that's interesting there, and there's something interesting there, and cool,
Yeah.
and not necessarily with the frame of like, is this the blockbuster of the next
Right.
year, but like how, like, being able to listen to the whole thing and pick out the interesting parts and say, okay, well, if you could figure out an act 3 for this, you
Yeah.
could really
I mean,
have
that
something
really
here.
that resonates for me just broadly in general. There's like an orientation. I mean, for our sort of non-creative work and for creative projects, but there is the thing that really gets me is people who are just like focused on the why you can't, or like, oh, you can't do that, or default to this,
Yeah.
like, oh no. Oh, that'll never work, or no, it's never, and it's even like you take one side and they tell you why that doesn't work. So you're like, okay, well, what about this side? And they tell you why that doesn't work. And it's just like, I need to get away from you. Like it's so draining for me. And it's like infuriating, actually. It triggers this like fury in me of just like, get out of here. If you can't be productive, if you can't, like, let's get around the table and figure this out. We can figure this out, but you have to want to, you know what I mean?
I think people get really good. People want to do what they're good at, and a lot of people, it's a really comfortable skill to be in the shooting down business, to
Yeah.
be in it, and it's just such easy pickings. You could
Yeah.
always there's so much material with which to say why something is bad.
Yeah, totally. There was that great quote, that David Baker quote in a recent email. Do you remember that? I almost want to pull it up. That would be just like the worst TV, but I almost want to try it. Do you remember that quote that came?
What was the general gist of it?
It was exactly that. It's like any asshat can shoot things down. You remember this? Let's see if I can find it. No.
Here, I found it. After 15 minutes, any asshat can shoot something down. maybe the point has been made. There was this great. There was a great podcast. As you're looking for it, I'll just vamp.
Okay.
There was this great podcast that I just heard.
Oh, here we go. I found it.
You're gonna gotta let me finish my sentence.
Okay, great podcast. Yeah.
No, maybe not. I already lost it. It's okay.
It's so flippin' easy to be skeptical. It takes no imagination or hope or reaching. It just feels so satisfying to shovel gravel into someone's oatmeal, but that's not leadership. Nice. It's good. I mean, it's so flippin' easy to be skeptical is what I loved about that. It takes no imagination or hope or reaching.
And the funny thing, and the funny thing about skepticism, it's got the what is the word, the patish or the patash or the panish, or what's the word that's got the the
patina?
The patina. It's got the patina of thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
People think it's just like, well, I've been around, and this is my wisdom is why it won't work.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's nothing that can't be improved. I mean, of course, there are things that are a waste of time, but unless you're steering towards a positive direction, like negativity it's just a waste of time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking about it right now, but like why bother with that? It's just like, oh my God, let's table that. Let's workshop it because I'm doing this thing, which is so important that we really gotta get the touchdown. I mean, I think we in everything that we do, we're looking for the next touchdown. You should be trying to score something, and it's just like, well, let's
Well, and I think what's also so frustrating is it's so much more powerful, the negative side. It's like the power of the dark side.
Dark side, totally.
Because like any possible idea is fragile, and you can smash it really easily. And you can mock it. I mean, that's the other thing.
This baby is so weak.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so easy to mock. Like that's another form it takes is you say, well, something, and someone's like, they mock it, and it's like impossible, and then the mood in the whole room turns, and the thing is lost, and you're like frustrated because it could have gotten there. It's harder to get to yes, it's harder to get to a win than it is to just dash it, but the win is there. And so this sort of like mockery or this negativity crushes it before it even had a chance, and makes it look like it didn't have a chance, when you're like, it had a chance if you just had kept your stupid mouth shut or like stayed out of it. You don't even have to just don't crush it. You know what I mean? Just let us look at this 10 different ways. And actually, I feel like you and I have done that so many times when someone has told us no, in a work context, someone has told us essentially no, maybe 6 different times. And then if we're just like, well, let's talk this through. And then you find a way to get to yes. And I always sort of would hope that we would get the like parade afterwards of being like, you guys sure were right. Doesn't tend to happen.
Never happens. But yeah.
It is fragile though. Like any possible potential win is fragile. And I just feel like people, if I was setting a culture around it, maybe we should think about this. It's just like there should be a culture set around like, respect it. Respect the possibility of something new.
Right. And, I'm just thinking about how, I don't know if this is related, but the idea of respecting the muse as well. I don't know, is this unrelated completely? But I have this idea that my biggest frustration in life, recurring in my life, has been you go through times creatively or just in terms of generating creative energy and creative stuff, where sort of the equivalent of writer's block, where nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Like you've been, maybe I've done this before, where was working and commuting, and I just didn't have any time for creativity, and I was dying for some creative time, and I took a week off of work, and I was going to be creative for a week, and then I got to my creative week, and I had nothing was coming, and I was just like, why have you forsaken me? Because it seemed like, when I didn't have the ability to do it, it seemed like I was just like stuffing back so much stuff that when I had my week, I was just gonna just like let loose the fire hose, and it was just gonna go.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. And so then I started to realize that when the muse is afoot, when the muse is around, that's a precious time, and it's a tragedy when you have to cut it short for some reason. And there's infinite reasons that life cuts short, inspiration, whatever. But I put it in my brain that, like, how can I set up my life so that there's more chances that I can continue with the flow when it's around.
Yeah.
And respecting that. And why did I think that was related? Because it's something about the precious baby.
Yeah, totally.
Sometimes you do need time by yourself to let something
well, also
play.
like it might happen at an inopportune time or logistically inconvenient time, and I do feel silly sometimes being like, wait a second, I gotta drop everything and go record this idea, or like, I gotta take a kid to a practice, or whatever it is, and like, but this is and I do actually, I guess I've learned that that's going to be fleeting enough that I record it like in a voice memo on my phone. I'll quickly like record a voice memo, but I have countless great idea voice memos that once I record it, then I'm like, great, the deed is done. I'll come back to that someday. And I don't think I've ever come back to them. So that doesn't really count either. But yeah, I mean, that's maybe just sort of like, I'm filing that as yet another extra challenge when you're later in life, when you've got other responsibilities, when you've got a family. Maybe I imagine inaccurately that back in my 20s, if I had gotten some idea, I could have just like holed up in my room and done it until it was done. But I think that probably isn't true either, because
I think it's more of a habit of mine than it's a culture thing. That I mean, I think it's possible to in the relationships that you have, in the ecosystems that you have, to try to start to build that in. You know how people have like mental health days and sick days and stuff like that. It's just like, if there was a culture that allowed for, I'm not just going to capture this, because there is a different. I mean, we all. I mean, that's a great step, capturing the thing. But if you don't have
jumping into the swamp,
actually to be able to jump into the swamp for a little while, and just for people to, and they don't last forever.
Yeah,
there is time for life. There's time for other things, plenty of time. But I think that we've actually been conditioned. It's more of an unconditioning of the deprioritization of that. It's just like it's the lowest priority of all. And I think it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
it should get the hours that where it comes.
Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides of it, because I feel like that about my own creativity. But you could imagine, maybe this is that doubt about, this is just another version of that doubt creeping in. But you could imagine also, for instance, being a partner of someone who's like, I have the muse, I must disappear. And you're like, okay, I'll do lunches and take the kids to the, I had this other thing.
I think it has to be. I think it has to be balanced in terms. Yeah, if it always comes up when it's like there's any sort of chore going on, and you just end up not pulling your weight, that's no good. Like that's not fair. But I think that's
it's time to do the dishes.
That's a slippery
slope. I'm inspired.
Yeah,
can't do the dishes.
I can't.
See
I must run. it's like, yeah, have that, and also
Yeah.
share the chores. I think are it's one of the most important things in
So
life
you
is
are life
chores.
partnered with an artist.
Yeah.
So do you both do you is there a trade-off, like sometimes one of you gets the muse and has to disappear and sometimes the other gets the muse and has to disappear, or is there
I
any?
think we have some time. I think that maybe, yeah, I don't know that she is getting as much creative time as she wants. I think she takes all hours of the day. She will be checking to see if work emails
Hmm.
are, so it's like I think she's sort of put her own creativity
Mm-hmm.
too low as far as I'm concerned. But it's not because of, I don't think it's generally because of chores around the house. I think it's generally because she just defaults to the highest priority is my employer.
Right.
And
It's hard not to do that. I mean, we do, if we have urgent work matters, it's hard for those not to uh, swallow up other things.
yeah. So what have we learned? What have we learned?
What have we learned? I think one thing we've learned, to summarize, is get your builders around you, your positive builder uppers.
Yeah, and maybe also the main message is just be a positive builder upper, because to model it.
That's
I
right.
mean, we need more of those in the world. We need
That's
more
right.
people who are recognizing that, like, it's just like
Well, I'm also
support instead of slapping down.
I'm also familiar. I don't think I've done this for a while, but I'm familiar earlier in life with the impulse to show someone that you are like creatively tuned in and incisive by finding something to criticize or something to say could be better. What do you think of this? And then you watch it and you're like, oh, this is good, but let me find something to tell you that could make it better. And that's a way to prove my bona fides. Yeah, and so I think people overestimate the value of that when you're on the creator end, because I think people often are like, hey, check this out. It doesn't necessarily mean check it out and help me make it better. Unless they're like, check this out and help me make it better. It might be like, I need energy to keep going. Here's this like fragile, valuable egg.
Oh my God. This really reminds me of something I've been thinking a lot about, which is there's this idea of the wheel of consent, which is I think it sort of comes out of thinking about sexuality and stuff. But I think it applies to everything. Whereas there's what the wheel of consent illustrates is that there is doing and then being done to, and then there's giving and receiving, and those things are often conflated, but they're not the same thing. Like, the best example that I can think of is when you're playing a song. If I'm playing a song and I say I have this song, and it's about service, it's the fact that service is actually, I always think that, like, oh, if people are having a good conversation or if people are having a good time, it's like, it's not about service. You're not prostituting yourself for transactional reasons, But in fact, the healthy way is to be of service, and then to let the other person also be of service. So the idea, if I have a new song and I'm like, I've just worked a long time on this song, and I play you the song, in that time, you are doing me a favor by listening to this. This is blowing my mind in terms of like how to do a show.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing me a favor to hear this thing that I've just made. And in that sense, you're supporting me. You're giving me that positive energy, which you're talking about. But it should be absolutely clear. And this is the point, is that this is where consent comes in, is that you have to agree. Just because you're doing something for someone doesn't mean you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you like it doesn't mean that you're not serving or that it's for you. So when you're serving me, then it's about, what am I asking for so that you can do it. But then 2 weeks later, so let's say I play the song and you're like, oh, that's great, or whatever. You've done me the service of opening your heart and listening to my song. But then 2 weeks later, you might say, oh, man, I've been thinking about that song, and it would really mean a lot to me. I mean, not that you would do it in that same way, but let's say it's a show, and then it's just like, hey, would you play this song, because then I'm doing the same exact thing, but
Mhm.
then I'm serving you, and what you want then matters. And this the idea of the wheel of consent is that all these things are sort of like, you have to be really fluid. It's has to be going back and forth all the time. And but being clear about who is being served when, and making sure that everybody is game and not martyring themselves, but like is like happy to serve, and then able to receive service as well, and able to ask for, what do I need right now? And I think this is something that generally, at least in my experience, we're not good at communicating. Hey, could you do this for me?
Mm.
And the fact is that you should ask your friends to do things for you, because your friends want to do things for you.
Right.
That's the thing that's so hard to believe, I think.
Right.
Is that it's okay to sort of to clearly ask for what you want.
My camera battery is blinking a red light, like it's going to shut off any minute. So
this is like, this conversation is boring.
trigger the camera battery.
My light is telling me.
Well, I got a little lost on the wheel of service stuff and the service, and it reminded me a little bit of the super frou-frou restaurants where you have to like thank the waiter and they thank you for ordering and you thank the waiter anyway. But that
it's not that.
might have lost me. Sorry, might have lost me a little bit. But I think you could also sort of boil it down to saying like, know what you want from someone when you and articulate what you want. Like if we're talking about a system, the creative system. By the way, I'm sold that we should start writing up the creative system, because we'll start somewhere and we'll just build on it like we've done with the build tank. And why not? You know, we can make the create tank. We just start somewhere. Like set aside an hour of every week that we're going to do that. Let's do it. High five.
High five.
And I think one of those things that I take from what you were saying is, yeah, just articulate ahead of time for someone what you're asking for. Like when you have a new idea, you might need to bounce it off of someone and tell them ahead of time, what I really need here is encouragement and not feedback.
Well, and I think that a big thing also is serve and be served. It's like, be willing to serve and be willing to be served. Relationships are about this mutuality of letting the other person be in charge of how they can be served, and then letting yourself be in charge of how you can be served, and having that, and that can be in any way.
Interesting.
It can be the same
camera
act can be. You're done.
Well, I'm glad can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Hello.
You're frozen though. You really got a convenient.
It's like a pretty decent pose, isn't it?
A decent pose. Usually the stops don't.
Listen.
That much.
Yeah, just keep talking. All right.
I'm really thinking about this.
I'm tracking what you're saying.
I wonder if I can freeze too, just and pretend
like,
that
Yeah. No. Go ahead. I totally. Oh, there you are.
You're gone.
All right.
All right. Well,
say goodnight to the people.
Chris, say the signing off.
And broadcast.
And broadcast.